My name is Claire Whitman, and I'm 34 years old. 8 months after I buried my husband, his mother walked into my daughter's elementary school with a folder of court papers in her hand and told the front office I was mentally unstable. Ava was 7. She had Daniel's old Vanderbilt hoodie tied around her waist because she said it still smelled like him if she pressed her face into the sleeve. She was standing outside the principal's office with her unicorn backpack slipping off one shoulder, crying so hard she could barely breathe. And beside her stood my mother-in-law, Marcia Whitman, wearing pearls, a cream wool coat, and the soft, wounded expression she used whenever she wanted strangers to believe she was the victim. "She's not safe with Claire right now," Marcia told the principal. "My son would have wanted me to protect his daughter." His daughter. Not my daughter. Not our daughter. His daughter. That was the first time I understood Marcia wasn't grieving Daniel anymore. She was trying to replace him with Ava. When I arrived, Ava ran into my arms so fast her little shoes squeaked against the tile. She buried her face in my sweater and whispered, "Mommy, Grandma said maybe I have to live with her forever." I looked over Ava's head at Marcia. She didn't look ashamed. She didn't look sorry. She looked calm, almost pleased. "Claire," she said, lowering her voice like we were discussing something embarrassing at a church luncheon, "don't make this ugly. Think about what Daniel would have wanted." For 8 months I had swallowed every insult, every late-night text, every comment about my messy kitchen, my tired eyes, my grief, my parenting, my paycheck, my house. I told myself Marcia was broken because her only son was gone. I told myself pain makes people cruel sometimes, but pain didn't make her walk into my child's school with a custody petition. Planning did. 3 days later, she took me to family court. She told the judge I was unstable. She said Ava was neglected. She said I was isolating my daughter from the Whitman family. She cried into a folded tissue and called herself a grandmother with no choice. But Marcia had forgotten one thing. Daniel never deleted his old messages. And when my lawyer placed those texts in front of the judge, the ones where Marcia called me weak, where she said grief would make me easy to break, where she wrote, "Once Ava is with us, Claire won't control the trust anymore," my mother-in-law stopped crying, because for the first time the whole room saw what I had been living with. And this time, Marcia couldn't smile her way out of it. Daniel Whitman died on a Tuesday night in October, on a stretch of I-65 just south of Nashville, where the highway lights turn everything the color of old pennies. The state trooper called me at 11:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because Ava's nightlight had just clicked off by itself, the little plastic moon on her dresser fading from yellow to black. I was standing in the hallway with a basket of folded laundry balanced against my hip when my phone rang. "Mrs. Whitman?" the officer said. "No one calls you that at almost midnight unless something has already happened." Daniel had been driving home from a late client dinner. A pickup truck crossed the median in the rain. The officer said words like impact, immediate, no suffering. People say that when they are trying to be kind, they say it because they need something to give you, even when there is nothing useful left. I slid down the hallway wall with my phone still pressed to my ear. From Ava's room, I heard her small, sleepy voice. "Mommy?" I covered my mouth with my hand so she wouldn't hear the sound that came out of me. Daniel was 37 years old. He made pancakes every Saturday morning, always burned the first batch, and insisted the second batch was better because the pan had warmed up emotionally. He kept Ava's drawings in his desk drawer at work. He kissed the top of my head every time he passed behind me in the kitchen. And then, just like that, he became a folded flag at a funeral home, a box of personal effects, and a voicemail I played until the words blurred. Marcia arrived before sunrise. She didn't knock. She used the spare key Daniel had given her years before, back when boundaries felt unnecessary because nobody had tested them yet. I was sitting at the kitchen table wearing one of Daniel's t-shirts, staring at a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. Marcia walked in wearing black slacks, pearl earrings, and grief like a tailored coat. "Oh, Claire," she said and wrapped her arms around me. For one moment I let her. Because whatever she had been before that morning, difficult, critical, too involved, she was still Daniel's mother. She had lost her only son. I told myself that mattered. Then she pulled back and looked around my kitchen. "There are dishes in the sink," she said softly. "You poor thing, you're already overwhelmed." That was Marcia. Even her concern had teeth. The funeral happened 4 days later at First Presbyterian in Franklin, the church where the Whitmans had sat in the same third-row pew for 30 years. The sanctuary was full of realtors, bankers, church ladies, Daniel's law firm partners, and people who touched my shoulder like grief was contagious, but manners required contact. Ava wore a navy dress Marcia bought without asking me. She should look proper for her father, Marcia said when I objected. I was too tired to fight over fabric. During the service, Ava sat on my lap with Daniel's old Vanderbilt hoodie clutched in both hands. She had refused to leave the house without it. Every few minutes, she pressed her face into the sleeve and inhaled like she was trying to find her father hiding in the cotton. Marcia noticed. After the burial, she crouched in front of Ava and said, "Sweetheart, Grandma's house has lots of things that belong to Daddy. If you ever miss him too much, you can come stay with me." Ava looked up at me, confused. I forced a smile. "That's kind of Grandma," I said. What I wanted to say was, "Don't make promises to my child while we are standing next to her father's grave." But I didn't. That became the pattern. Marcia offered help, and every offer came with a hook buried inside it. She brought casseroles, then rearranged my pantry. She came over to fold laundry, then commented that Ava's socks didn't match. She offered to drive Ava to school, then asked the teacher whether Ava had seemed emotionally neglected. I found that out 2 weeks later from Mrs. Langley, Ava's second-grade teacher, who pulled me aside at pickup. "Claire," she said carefully, "Marcia asked if we'd noticed any signs that Ava wasn't being properly cared for." The words hit me so strangely I almost laughed. Properly cared for. I was sleeping 4 hours a night. I was making Ava breakfast, packing lunches, signing reading logs, paying the mortgage, answering sympathy cards, and crying in the laundry room with the dryer running so my daughter wouldn't hear me. But Marcia had seen one pile of dishes and turned it into evidence. That evening, I asked her not to contact the school without telling me first. We were standing in my living room. Behind her, Daniel's wedding photo had been moved from the mantel to the side table. In its place, Marcia had placed a framed picture of Daniel at age 10, missing one front tooth, wearing a baseball uniform. "I'm her grandmother," Marcia said. "You are," I replied, "but I'm her mother." Her expression changed then, only for a second. The softness left her face and something colder looked out through her eyes. "Of course you are," she said. "Right now, Ava needs all of us." "No," I said quietly. "Ava needs stability." Marcia picked up her purse. "You're very emotional, Claire, I understand that, but emotional women don't always see what children need." I stood there after she left, listening to the front door click shut. Upstairs, Ava called for me. "Mommy, can Grandma take me if you cry too much?" For a few seconds I couldn't move. Then I went upstairs, sat on the edge of my daughter's bed, and pulled her into my arms. "No, baby," I whispered. "Nobody is taking you from me." But even as I said it, I could still hear Marcia's voice in my head. Emotional women don't always see what children need, and for the first time since Daniel died, my grief had company. Fear. The first text came at 6:13 the next morning. "Did Ava sleep through the night?" I stared at the screen while the coffee maker sputtered behind me. Ava was still upstairs, curled in the middle of my bed because she had woken up at 2 a.m. asking if heaven had windows. I typed back, "Yes, she's okay." Marcia responded immediately. "Are you?" That should have sounded kind. It didn't. It sounded like a question someone asks when they are already writing down the answer. By noon, she had sent 7 more messages. "Did Ava eat breakfast? Did you pack her lunch? Did she wear the blue coat? It's colder than you think. Have you called the grief counselor I recommended? Are you taking anything to sleep? You looked exhausted yesterday. I'm worried people will start noticing." That last one made me put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. People, that was always Marcia's real courtroom, the church ladies, the school office, Daniel's old partners, the neighbors who waved while slowly collecting every detail they could repeat later over coffee. Franklin was beautiful from a distance. Brick sidewalks, white fences, historic homes with gas lanterns burning beside polished front doors. But under all that southern charm, it was still a town where reputations moved faster than weather. And Marcia Whitman knew how to make weather. The next week, she started appearing everywhere. On Monday, she was in the school parking lot when I dropped Ava off. "Oh," she said, stepping out of her Lexus with a paper bag from a bakery Ava liked. "I thought I'd surprise my granddaughter." Ava looked at me first. That small glance broke my heart more than the surprise itself. 7-year-olds should not have to check whether affection is dangerous. "She already had breakfast," I said. Marcia smiled. "A muffin won't hurt her. Children need sweetness after trauma." Trauma. She said the word softly, but she looked toward Mrs. Langley, Ava's teacher, as she said it. On Wednesday, Marcia came by the house without calling. I was in the laundry room sorting Ava's school uniforms. The living room still had a blanket on the couch from the night before, a juice cup on the coffee table, and 3 library books spread open on the rug. Normal things. Human things. Mother and child trying to survive things. Marcia stood in the doorway and looked around like she was inspecting damage after a flood. "Claire," she said, "this isn't good." I folded a pair of Ava's leggings. "It's a living room, Marcia. It's disorder. It's Wednesday." She took out her phone. I stopped folding. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." But the camera sound clicked before she lowered it. Something cold moved through me. "You're taking pictures of my house?" "I'm documenting," she said. "Documenting what?" Her face softened in that practiced way, the one that made other people lean toward her instead of away. "That you need help." I walked across the room and opened the front door. "You need to leave." For the first time, Marcia didn't move immediately. She looked past me toward the stairs where Ava's room sat above us, painted pale yellow because Daniel had said every little girl deserved to wake up inside sunshine. "You can't keep her from us," Marcia said. "I'm not keeping her from anyone. I'm asking you to respect boundaries." "Boundaries," she repeated, almost smiling. "That's a word women use when they want to isolate children." I didn't answer. I just held the door open until she walked out. That night, the text changed. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." I didn't reply. Daniel's family has rights. I still didn't reply. "If you keep behaving this way, I'll have to take steps." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to write, "What steps?" I wanted to write, "Stop threatening me." I wanted to write, "You lost a son, but I lost my husband and Ava lost her father, and you do not get to turn that into ownership." Instead, I took a screenshot. That was the first one I saved. I didn't know then how many there would be. Over the next month, Marcia built her story one small lie at a time. She called Ava's pediatrician and asked whether missed sleep could affect maternal judgment. She told Mrs. Langley that Ava had been withdrawn at home, even though she had not been inside my home since the day I made her leave. She asked our pastor to check on Claire, then cried in his office and said she was afraid I was shutting the Whitmans out of Ava's life. Every concern became a seed, every seed became a rumor, and every rumor came back to me wearing someone else's voice. A neighbor brought over banana bread and asked if I was managing alone. The pastor's wife texted that grief support groups were nothing to be ashamed of. A woman from Daniel's firm said Marcia was only trying to protect what was left of him. What was left of him? As if Ava were a keepsake, as if my daughter were a framed photograph, a watch, a box of ashes, something the Whitmans could claim because Daniel's blood ran through her veins. One Friday night, after Ava fell asleep, I sat at Daniel's desk for the first time since the accident. His coffee mug was still there, clean but unused. His legal pads were stacked in the corner. His old phone sat in the top drawer, dead, wrapped in the charging cord he always twisted too tightly. I plugged it in. I don't know why. Maybe loneliness. Maybe instinct. Maybe some part of me still believed Daniel had left an answer somewhere. The Apple logo appeared. Then the lock screen lit up with a picture of Ava on Daniel's shoulders at the county fair. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, a notification banner slid across the screen. It was from Marcia, sent to Daniel 3 weeks before he died. "You need to think seriously about what happens to Ava if Claire falls apart. She was never strong enough for this family." I sat very still. Then I unlocked the phone and I started reading. At first, I told myself not to read too much. That was the lie I needed for the first 5 minutes. Daniel's phone felt wrong in my hands, too familiar and too private at the same time. The case still had a crack across the bottom left corner from when Ava dropped it on the driveway the summer before. His thumbprint no longer opened it, of course, but I knew his passcode. Our anniversary, September 18th. The messages loaded slowly, like the phone itself didn't want to give me what was inside. Marcia's name appeared again and again. Mom. That was how Daniel had saved her. Just Mom. No warning label. No locked drawer. No sign that the woman who had kissed my cheek at my wedding and called me sweetheart in public had been discussing my weakness behind my back for years. I opened the thread. The first messages were ordinary. Dinner plans, church fundraisers, Ava's birthday, a reminder that Richard's blood pressure medicine had changed. Then about 6 months before the accident, the tone shifted. Mom, Daniel wrote, Claire is Ava's mother. You need to stop correcting her in front of our daughter. Marcia replied 3 minutes later, I'm not correcting her. I'm protecting Ava from being raised without standards. Daniel answered, Claire has standards. You just don't like that they aren't yours. I sat back in his desk chair. For 8 months, I had carried a quiet little resentment toward Daniel. Not because he died, never that, but because he had left me alone with his mother, alone with her opinions and her soft little knives, and part of me had wondered if maybe he had never truly seen what she was doing. But he had seen it. He had seen more than I knew. I scrolled. You're blinded by marriage, Marcia wrote in July. Claire is fragile. She always has been. She doesn't have Whitman's strength. Daniel's reply came almost immediately. Whitman's strength is not bullying people until they obey you. I covered my mouth. The room blurred. Not because of Marcia, because of Daniel. He had defended me in rooms I wasn't in. He had fought battles I didn't know were happening. And somehow that made the grief sharper, not softer. There are losses that hurt again when you discover new reasons to miss someone. Then I found the message that made my hands go cold. If anything ever happens to me, Ava stays with Claire. That is not up for discussion. Marcia replied, You say that now, but if you were gone, Claire would collapse. Everyone would see it. Ava would need us. Us, not me. Not her mother. Us. I kept reading, even though every line felt like putting my hand deeper into a drawer full of broken glass. Marcia had asked Daniel to add her as a secondary guardian in his estate documents. He refused. She asked him to put her name on Ava's education savings account. He refused that too. She asked whether the life insurance would be protected from Claire's poor judgment. Daniel wrote, Claire is my wife. I trust her with everything. There was no reply from Marcia for 2 days. Then this. One day you'll understand that love makes men stupid. I took screenshots of everything. My fingers moved mechanically. Capture, save, send to myself. Capture, save, send to myself. At 1:18 a.m. I found the group chat. Marcia, Linda, Richard. Richard barely wrote anything. Mostly thumbs-up reactions, a few short sentences. The digital version of standing in the corner and letting your wife set the house on fire. Linda, Marcia's best friend from church, was more active. You need documentation, Linda wrote. Courts care about patterns. Marcia replied, I know. Claire is sloppy when she's upset. I just need enough people to see it. Another message. Grief makes women careless. If I push the right buttons, she'll break. I stopped breathing. Not because I was surprised. By then, surprise had already left the room. What stunned me was the planning, the patience. The way Marcia had taken my worst days, the sink full of dishes, the missed phone calls, the mornings I cried in the shower before waking Ava, and treated them like puzzle pieces for a case she hoped to build. Then came the message that changed everything. Once Ava is with us, Claire won't control the trust anymore. Daniel never should have left everything in her hands. I read it 3 times. The trust. Daniel's life insurance had funded a trust for Ava's education and future care. I was the trustee. Not because I asked, because Daniel had insisted. He had sat beside me in our attorney's office 2 years earlier, holding my hand under the conference table and said, if something happens to me, Claire decides. No one else. At the time, I told him not to talk like that. Now those words were the only thing standing between my daughter and a woman who saw grief as an opening. The next morning, I called 3 family lawyers before breakfast. The first 2 couldn't see me for weeks. The third had a receptionist who went quiet when I explained that my mother-in-law had been documenting my house, contacting my child's school, and sending messages about taking control of a trust. "One moment," she said. 30 seconds later, a woman came on the line. "This is Emily Carter." Her voice was calm, not warm exactly, better than warm, steady. I told her everything. I told her about Daniel, about Ava, about Marcia's visits, the school questions, the photos, the texts, the old phone. When I finished, Emily didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She didn't give me the pity voice people had been using since October. She said, "Do not delete anything. Do not respond emotionally. Do not block her yet. From this moment forward, every message she sends is evidence." Evidence. The word settled over me like armor. That afternoon, Marcia came to Ava's school. She did not call me first. She did not ask permission. She walked into the front office with a manila folder, a trembling voice, and the confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. I was 12 minutes late because of an accident near Columbia Pike. 12 minutes. That was all the time she needed to try to take my daughter. By the time I reached the school, rain was coming down sideways across the parking lot. I remember leaving my car crooked in a visitor space, one tire over the yellow line, the engine still ticking when I slammed the door. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys on the asphalt. I picked them up and ran. Inside, the front office smelled like wet coats, printer paper, and the vanilla hand sanitizer the receptionist kept beside the sign-in sheet. "Mrs. Alvarez?" The school secretary looked up when I came in. Her face did something I will never forget. Relief. Not surprise. Not confusion. Relief. "Mrs. Whitman," she said quickly, standing. "We were just about to call you again." Again. That one word told me Marcia had been there long enough to make a scene. I looked past her into the principal's office. Ava sat in one of the little visitor chairs, her knees pulled together, her unicorn backpack on the floor between her feet. Her face was red and wet. She had one hand wrapped around the sleeve of Daniel's Vanderbilt hoodie, like it was a rope keeping her from falling. Marcia stood beside her, one hand resting on Ava's shoulder. Ownership. That was what it looked like. Not comfort, not protection. Ownership. The principal, Mr. Hanley, was standing behind his desk with a folder in his hand, and the expression of a man who had realized too late that politeness had invited danger into his building. "Mommy," Ava whispered. Then she ran. I dropped to my knees right there in the office doorway, and she hit my chest so hard I almost lost my balance. "Grandma said you were sick," Ava sobbed into my coat. "She said that maybe I had to go with her because you forgot me." I looked over Ava's head at Marcia. For a second, the mask slipped. There was no grief in her face, no worry, just irritation. Like Ava had delivered the wrong line in a play Marcia had rehearsed for weeks. Then the softness came back. "Claire," she said, "you're making this more frightening for her." I stood slowly, keeping Ava behind me. "No," I said. "You did that." Mr. Hanley cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitman, your mother-in-law presented documents indicating she has filed an emergency petition." "Filed," I said, "not granted." Marcia's mouth tightened. "She is an immediate family member," she said to him, "not to me. Her father is dead. Claire is unstable. The child needs temporary protection while the court reviews the matter." The child. I felt Ava's fingers clutch the back of my coat. "Do you have a court order signed by a judge?" I asked. Marcia lifted her chin. "The petition is pending." "Then you have no authority to remove my daughter from school." The room went quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when everyone understands the truth, but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. Mr. Hanley closed the folder. "Mrs. Whitman," he said to Marcia, "without a signed order or custodial authorization, we cannot release Ava to you." Marcia turned to him slowly. "You would keep a child in an unsafe situation because of paperwork?" He looked at Ava, then at me, then back at Marcia. "I would keep a child with her legal parent because of the law." I could have kissed that man on the forehead. Marcia gathered her papers with precise, angry movements. Before she left, she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You bought yourself a few days," she whispered. "That's all." I didn't answer. I just held Ava tighter. That night, after I got Ava into bed, I sat on the kitchen floor with my laptop open and every light in the house turned on. I don't know why I needed the lights. Maybe because the dark made everything feel too much like the night Daniel died. Emily Carter called at 9:16. "I got the petition," she said. "Marcia is asking for emergency temporary custody, supervised visitation for you if granted, and control over Ava's educational and medical decisions." My stomach dropped. "She can ask for that?" She can ask for the moon, Emily said. That doesn't mean the court hands it to her. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But fear is not logical. Fear is your child's empty bedroom before anything has happened. Fear is a school hallway. Fear is your daughter asking whether crying makes you lose your mother rights. Emily continued. She attached photographs of your living room, screenshots of unanswered texts, a statement from your pastor saying you appeared overwhelmed, and notes claiming Ava expressed a desire to stay with her grandmother. That's not true, I said. I know, but we need to prove the larger pattern. Send me everything. Every text, every screenshot from Daniel's phone, every voicemail, doorbell footage if you have it, school emails, medical records, counselor appointments, everything. Everything. That became my job. Not grieving, not sleeping, not falling apart, everything. For the next 6 hours, I built the file that would save my daughter. I made folders by date, I labeled screenshots, I exported voicemails, I downloaded the doorbell camera clip from the afternoon Marcia stood on my porch and said, "You don't get to decide where Daniel's daughter belongs." I found the pediatrician portal showing every appointment Ava had attended, dental cleanings, vaccinations, therapy intake forms, teacher emails praising her reading progress, photos from science fair night where Ava stood beside her poster about butterflies with glitter on her cheeks and a gap-toothed smile Daniel would never see. At 2:43 a.m., I found one more message on Daniel's phone. It was from Marcia to Linda, sent 2 months before the accident. Daniel thinks the trust is safe with Claire. But grief changes people. If anything happens, I'll make the court see she can't handle Ava or the money. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like words. Then I forwarded the screenshot to Emily. She replied 1 minute later. This is the one. I sat back against the kitchen cabinets and finally let myself cry. Not because I was weak, because for the first time since Marcia walked into that school, I knew something she didn't. She had built a case out of my grief. But she had left a trail in her own words. And in family court, words become evidence. The courthouse in Williamson County did not look like a place where families broke open. It looked clean, polished, almost ordinary. White walls, metal detectors, a security guard drinking coffee from a paper cup, mothers with diaper bags, men in suits staring at their phones, lawyers walking fast with folders pressed to their chests. Everything moved like a normal Monday morning, as if somewhere behind one of those wooden doors, my daughter's life was not about to be discussed by strangers. Emily met me outside courtroom 3B. She wore a navy suit and carried one black binder, just one. Marcia arrived with 2 attorneys, Richard behind her, and a face already prepared for sympathy. She wore pale gray, pearls, and no lipstick. Her eyes were slightly red, but not from crying. I knew because real crying ruins you differently. Real crying makes you forget mirrors exist. Marcia had remembered the mirror. When she saw me, she stepped close enough for only me to hear. "You should have settled this privately, Claire." I looked at her. "You tried to take my child from school." Her mouth curved a little. "I tried to protect my granddaughter." Before I could answer, Emily touched my elbow. "Not here," she said quietly. So I swallowed it, again. That had been the story of my life since Daniel died. Swallow the anger, swallow the fear, swallow the insult, because if I showed too much emotion, Marcia would point and say, "See? Unstable." But that morning, I didn't need to prove I was calm. The binder would do that for me. Judge Patricia Harlan entered at 9:04. Everyone stood. Marcia bowed her head slightly like she was entering church instead of a courtroom. Her attorney spoke first. He painted a beautiful picture. That was the worst part. If you did not know the truth, it almost sounded loving. A grieving grandmother, a deceased only son, a little girl caught between loss and instability, a young widow overwhelmed by responsibility. He showed photos of my living room blanket, the dishes in my sink, the juice cup on the coffee table. He showed unanswered texts. He mentioned grief counseling as if therapy were a confession instead of an act of survival. Then Marcia took the stand. She dabbed at her eyes before the first question. "I love Ava more than anything," she said. "She's all we have left of Daniel." All we have left. I felt Emily shift beside me, but she did not object. Not yet. Marcia continued, "Claire is not a bad person. She's just broken. She forgets things. She sleeps during the day. She keeps Ava from us. She won't let Ava spend time in the home where her father grew up. I begged her to accept help, but she became hostile." Her voice cracked on the last word. Hostile. I looked down at my hands. My nails were pressed so hard into my palm that little half-moons had appeared in the skin. Emily stood. She moved slowly, carrying 3 printed pages instead of the whole binder. Mrs. Whitman, she said, you stated under oath that your goal is Ava's emotional well-being, correct? Yes. Not control? Marcia blinked. Of course not. Not access to Daniel Whitman's estate planning? Her face tightened. That is offensive. Emily nodded once. Then I'll ask you to read your own words. She placed the first page in front of Marcia. The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It changed the way air changes before lightning. Marcia looked down. She did not read. Emily waited. Judge Harlan leaned forward. Mrs. Whitman, the judge said, please answer counsel's question. Marcia's throat moved. Emily read it for her. Once Ava is with us, Claire won't control the trust anymore. Daniel never should have left everything in her hands. Did you write that? Marcia stared at the paper. That was taken out of context. What context makes a child custody petition about controlling a trust? No one moved. Richard looked at the floor. Emily placed down the second page. This message was sent to Linda Harrow 2 months before Daniel died. You wrote, Claire is weak. If I push the right buttons, she'll break. Did you write that? Marcia's face had gone pale beneath the powder. I was concerned. Concerned enough to push buttons? Marcia said nothing. Emily placed down the third page. And this message sent after Daniel's funeral. Document everything. Courts love patterns. If she cries in public, even better. Did you write that? For the first time since I had known her, Marcia had no expression ready. No soft smile. No wounded eyes. No trembling hand. Just silence. Emily turned toward the judge. Your Honor, Mrs. Whitman did not observe instability and then seek protection. She sought custody first and manufactured instability around it. Marcia's attorney objected, but his voice had lost its confidence. Judge Harlan looked at Marcia. Mrs. Whitman, did you go to Ava's school without a signed custody order? Marcia swallowed. I was worried. That was not my question. Yes. Did you tell the child she might have to live with you forever? Marcia's eyes flicked toward me. I held her gaze. Yes, she whispered. The judge removed her glasses. That small movement felt louder than a gavel. Then Emily played the doorbell footage. Marcia's voice filled the courtroom. You're going to lose, Claire, and when you do, I'll make sure Ava understands you forced this. Then my voice quieter. Ava is not a prize. Marcia's reply came through the speaker, sharp and clean. No, she's a Whitman. The video ended. I did not look at Marcia. I looked at the judge, because for the first time in 8 months, someone with the power to stop this had heard exactly what Marcia meant when she said family. Judge Harlan sat back. This court will not remove a child from her legal parent based on a campaign of manufactured concern. Marcia made a small sound, not a sob, a collapse. The judge continued. The emergency custody petition is denied. Mrs. Whitman is prohibited from contacting the child's school, medical providers, or counselors. Any visitation will be supervised pending further review. Marcia turned toward me then, eyes wide, as if I had done something cruel by letting her own words speak. I wanted to say many things. I wanted to ask if she still thought I was weak. Instead, I picked up my purse, stood beside my lawyer, and walked out of that courtroom, still Ava's mother. No one had given that back to me. I had kept it. The first thing I did after court was drive to Ava's school. Not home, not my lawyer's office, not some quiet parking lot where I could finally fall apart without witnesses. I drove straight to Franklin Elementary, walked into the front office, and handed Mrs. Alvarez the certified copy of Judge Harlan's order. She read it once. Then she read it again. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. I'm so sorry, she said. I nodded because if I opened my mouth too quickly, I knew I would cry. Ava's emergency contact form was updated before lunch. Marcia Whitman's name was removed from the pickup list, the medical release list, and the approved visitor list. A red note went into Ava's file stating that no information was to be released to anyone from the Whitman family without written permission from me or my attorney. It was just paperwork, a few signatures, a few printed pages, a few clicks in a school computer system. But when I walked back to my car, I felt like I had rebuilt a wall around my child with my bare hands. That afternoon, Ava came running out of the school doors with her backpack bouncing against her little shoulders. She stopped when she saw my face. Mommy? I knelt on the sidewalk. Everything is okay, I told her. She looked over my shoulder toward the parking lot, searching for the cream Lexus that had become part of her nightmares. Grandma isn't coming? No, baby. Not today. Not without rules. Ava thought about that for a second. Rules are good. Rules are how we keep people safe. She nodded, serious in the way children become serious when adults have asked them to understand too much. Then she put her small hand in mine and said, "Can we get pancakes for dinner?" So we did. Daniel used to say breakfast for dinner fixed almost anything. It did not fix death. It did not fix betrayal. It did not erase the sound of Marcia's voice in that courtroom saying Ava was a Whitman like she was naming property. But it gave my daughter syrup on her chin in 1 normal hour. Sometimes that is where healing starts. Over the next few weeks, the silence from Marcia was almost louder than her texts had been. No 6 a.m. questions. No just checking in. No warnings dressed as concern. No surprise visits with bakery bags and judgment. At first, I kept expecting her to appear. I checked the doorbell camera every time a car slowed outside the house. I woke up at night and walked to Ava's room just to make sure she was still there, one leg outside the blanket, Daniel's hoodie tucked beside her pillow. Grief had made me tired. Fear had made me alert. Motherhood made me keep going anyway. Emily called 2 weeks after the hearing. Marcia's attorney withdrew the emergency petition, she said. They're not appealing the order. I sat down on the edge of my bed. She's done? For now, Emily said. But the court record is clear. If she tries again, those texts come with her. Those texts. For months, I had hated seeing Marcia's name light up my phone. I hated the way one message could change the air in my house. I hated how she had turned my quietest moments into accusations. But in the end, her words had protected us. Not because they were kind, because they were honest in a way she never meant them to be. Richard came by once in early December. He stood on my porch holding a small wrapped box and looking 10 years older than he had in court. His shoulders had folded inward. His face had that gray, hollow look men get when they finally realize silence is not the same as innocence. I brought Ava's Christmas ornament, he said. Daniel made it when he was little. I did not open the door all the way. You can leave it there. He placed the box on the welcome mat. Claire, he said, I should have stopped her. I looked at him through the narrow opening. Yes, I said, you should have. He flinched, but he did not argue. I loved my son, he whispered. I know, I said, but loving Daniel did not give either of you the right to take his daughter from me. He looked down at the mat. Can I send Ava a card sometime? Through my attorney. That was the last thing I said before I closed the door. 3 months later, Ava drew a picture in therapy. A yellow house, a tree, a little girl, a mother holding her hand. Above them in the corner of the page, she drew a blue star. That's Daddy, she told me in the car afterward. He's watching, but he's not worried anymore. I had to pull over. Not because I was broken, because sometimes relief comes so gently you don't recognize it until it knocks the breath out of you. That night, after Ava fell asleep, I sat at Daniel's desk and opened the black binder Emily had returned to me. Inside were the screenshots, the court order, the school documents, the doorbell transcript, the whole ugly map of what Marcia had tried to do. I placed one copy of the judge's order in the top drawer beside Daniel's old phone. Not because I wanted to remember the war, because I wanted to remember that I survived it. Marcia thought grief would make me weak. She thought if she pushed hard enough, I would break in exactly the way she had predicted. But grief had already taken Daniel. It had already taken the sound of his car in the driveway, the weight of his hand on my back, the future we thought we had time to build. The only thing grief had not taken was Ava. And when someone came for her, I did not break. I documented. I showed up. I told the truth. And when the court saw Marcia's texts, the woman who called herself family finally had to face what her version of love really was. Control. Ava is asleep upstairs now, safe, warm, home. And every night before I turn off the hall light, I stand outside her door for a second and listen to her breathe. Not because I'm afraid anymore, because she is still here, because I kept her, because I am still her mother.